Hello, my name is Payal. I'm a lawyer and a migration agent, and I'd like to explain to you who a refugee is. It's important that you understand this definition because if you apply to the Department of Immigration and Citizenship, or DIAC, for a protection visa, this is the definition that the Department of Immigration officer will use to decide your case. It's important to remember that what I'm about to explain to you is not legal advice. I'm just trying to make the definition of who a refugee is simpler so that it's easier for you to understand. When you apply to the Department of Immigration for a protection visa, this is the definition that the Department of Immigration officer will use to decide your case. It's important that you understand the definition because it will help you to decide whether you should apply for a protection visa and also what the DIAC officer will think about when they decide your case. So where does the definition of who a refugee is come from? The definition of who a refugee is comes from the Refugee Convention. I'm not going to explain the full definition here. You can find that by clicking on Refugee Convention definition on this website. There are 8 parts to the Refugee Convention definition. Your situation must fit into all 8 of these things for you to be found to be a refugee. If your situation does not meet all 8 of these things, then you might not be a refugee. The DIAC officer can also consider something called Complementary Protection if they find that you are not a refugee. I'll explain more about that later. The first part of the Refugee Convention definition is that you're outside your home country. This should be easy to understand. If you're not in your home country, then you will satisfy this criteria. The second part of the Refugee Convention definition is that you must be afraid to go home. The DIAC officer will think about your story and your actions in your home country and also your actions since arriving in Australia when they decide whether or not they believe that you're afraid to go home. The third part of the definition is that you're afraid that if you go home, you'll be persecuted. Persecution means serious harm. This means that you're afraid that if you go home, you'll be seriously, physically, or mentally harmed. Some examples of persecution include being falsely imprisoned or wrongly arrested, being tortured or being killed. It's important that you tell the DIAC case officer about all the times that you've been persecuted in the past or seriously harmed for a convention reason. But it's important also to remember that you must demonstrate why you would be harmed if you went back home now. The fourth part of the definition of who a refugee is that you're afraid that if you go home, you'll be persecuted for one of 5 reasons. These are the reasons found in the Refugee Convention. Often these reasons are referred to as convention reasons. The 5 convention reasons in the Refugee Convention are race, religion, political opinion, nationality, and membership of a particular social group. To be found to be a refugee, you must be able to demonstrate that you're afraid that if you go home, you will be persecuted or seriously harmed for one of these 5 reasons. I'll explain more about those reasons now. Persecution because of your race means that you'll face serious harm in your home country because of your ethnicity. Persecution because of your religion involves serious harm because of your religious beliefs or practices. Persecution can include not being allowed to freely practice your religion. Persecution because of your political opinion might include being persecuted or targeted because you're a member of a particular political party, or being targeted because you express anti-government views. Persecution because of your nationality means that you'll be persecuted or targeted because of the particular country that you come from. A particular social group is a group of people who share something in common. This might be a shared physical characteristic, or a shared belief, activity, aim, goal, or principle. Some examples of a particular social group include women in Pakistan, doctors in Iraq, journalists in Sri Lanka, homosexual men in Ethiopia. It's important to remember that the harm you fear on return to your home country must be targeted at you personally for one of the 5 convention reasons that I've just mentioned. It's not enough that there's a war or a bad situation in your country which you're trying to escape from. You must be able to demonstrate that your situation or your story fits into the Refugee Convention definition and to one of the 5 convention reasons. The 5th part of the definition of who a refugee is that your fear of persecution must be well-founded. This means there must be a good and true reason for your fear of persecution if you go home. The Diet case officer will look at independent information from your home country and will also listen to the stories of things that have happened to you and your family in the past when they decide whether or not your fear of persecution is well-founded. Having a well-founded fear of persecution means that, as well as being personally afraid, there is some independent evidence or some good reason that the case officer can see for you to be afraid. The 6th part of the definition relates to relocation. The DIAC officer will look at whether you can relocate in your own country and find safety. If you can relocate in your own country and find safety, then the DIAC officer may not find you to be a refugee. It will be important to consider whether or not you can go somewhere else in your country and find safety, or whether you would not be safe anywhere in your country. It's also important to consider whether your personal circumstances mean that it would be difficult for you to move to another part of your country and find safety. The 7th part of the Refugee Convention definition is that the government in your home country cannot protect you. This means that they are either unwilling or unable to protect you. The DIAC officer might ask you about whether or not you've reported problems that you've had in the past to the police. They might also look at independent information about the police or military in your country. You'll need to be able to explain why the government in your home country cannot protect you. If the DIAC officer believes that the government in your home country can protect you, then you will not be found to be a refugee. The 8th part of the definition is that you have no safe third country to go and live in. This means that the DIAC officer will look at whether you can find protection in a country other than Australia and your home country. For example, if you have a passport to live in another country other than your home country, the DIAC officer will look at whether or not you can go and live safely in that country. If your case does not fit into the definition of who a refugee is, complementary protection might apply to you. Complementary protection is a new law which came into effect in March 2012. It means that Australia now has to consider whether you need to be protected according to other international obligations that Australia has apart from under the Refugee Convention. If the DIAC officer decides that you are not a refugee, they have to consider whether they should offer you complementary protection. When making this decision, the DIAC officer will consider whether or not you'll face significant harm if you return home. This significant harm can be for a reason other than the Refugee Convention reasons. For more information about complementary protection and the meaning of significant harm, you can look at the Complementary Protection fact sheet on this website. You can find the fact sheet by clicking on the Resources tab on the top menu. Well, I hope you have a better understanding of who a refugee is and what the DIAC officer will consider when they decide your case. Remember, there are 8 main parts to the Refugee Convention definition, and your situation must fit all of those 8 parts. Remember also that complementary protection might apply to you. To summarise, you must make sure that you are outside of your home country. You must be afraid to go home. You must be afraid that if you go home, you'll be persecuted. You must be afraid that you'll be persecuted for one of 5 convention reasons. They are because of your race, your religion, your political opinion, your nationality, or your membership of a particular social group. Your fear of harm must be well-founded. You must show that you cannot relocate and find safety in your own country. You must also be able to show that the government in your home country cannot protect you, and that you have no safe third country where you can find protection. If the DIAC officer decides that you are not a refugee based on that convention, they must consider whether Australia's obligations under other international conventions apply. That is, they must consider whether complementary protection applies to you. Well, I hope that this has helped. Remember that you can find more information about who a refugee is and about complementary protection and about the process of applying for asylum in Australia on this website. Remember as well that the information on this website and in this video is not legal advice. It's just information to help you understand the process. If you're thinking about applying for a protection visa, or if you're in the process of applying for a protection visa, it's important that you seek advice from a registered migration agent who can give you specific advice about your personal situation and circumstances.